Hey everyone, welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast. I'm your co-host Tim Chelsvik, and I'm joined by Mr. Matt Drury.
What's up, man?
Hey, how are you?
Good. So I'm excited because we got Levi Morgan back with us today, the bow expert, probably our best bow guest we've had so far, really.
Yeah.
And of course he's got the TV show Bow Life on Sportsman's Channel, and the champ. I'm just gonna start calling him the champ. What's up, Levi?
How's it going, guys?
Thanks for being on the show, man. We appreciate it.
Wouldn't that be something if you know, like Rock? I always heard that people call Sylvester Stallone the champ, and even though he's not a boxer, but they just call him the champ, like off screen everywhere he goes. Like
Levi's actually earned it.
Levi earned it. It'd be cool, like if your nickname everywhere you went, everybody's like, "What's up, champ? Hey, champ."
Do you have a nickname that you can share with us?
A nickname?
Yeah.
Not any that's appropriate for this.
It's the internet, man.
I have a few names my wife calls me every once in a while when she's mad at me. Other than that, I don't.
We can all relate to that.
Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of cool though, because if you're in a hunting or an archery circle, you say Levi, people know who you're talking about.
It's pretty crazy, man. It really is. That's a testament to just how much you've kind of changed the game, because honestly, like, I know target archery has been around forever, but at least I wasn't aware of its popularity until I started hearing about this, and I say kid, we're probably the same age, but you start hearing about this kid that's just tearing up the archery, tournament. So
Levi's a spring chicken compared to us. Like, you and I are old guys. Levi's what, 31-ish?
31, yeah.
Oh, hell. Yeah. You got all kinds of life in front of you. We're in the downhill slide.
I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like I'm on the downhill slide, but I feel young at heart, but I can see a lot of things changing.
So this past season, because the question we're going to dive into today is all about archery, and this episode's kind of all about archery. So kind of take us through some of your big wins this year on the tournament trail.
Yeah, this year started off pretty slow, and it normally does for me because I'm hunting so much in the fall and all the way through January, and so right when the tournaments start, and so I think I got my first win of the year in Augusta, Georgia this year, and I won that one, and really kind of it kind of clicked for me there. I in Texas, the one right before that, I had some major equipment issues, and I was just a really frustrating tournament because I was shooting, I felt like as good or better than I ever had in my life. And so just had a lot of bad luck and made bad decisions early in the year and really crucial times in tournaments. And so about midway through the year, I kind of hit my stride and won the Augusta National. And then I won the London, Kentucky National. Actually won 4 ASAs in a row, the Illinois National, and then I won the ASA Worlds. And locked up Shooter of the Year. And Shooter of the Year is probably the most important to me. And it was because when I was a rookie, the guy that had broke all the records and held all the records in tournament archery had won 7 Shooter of the Years in a row. And he told me, and I was trying to congratulate him, but I was beating him at this tournament. And he told me pretty much that, that record would never be broken. Like, holy cow, so I kind of lit a fire under me then, and I set a goal to do that. And so this year would have been number 12 in a row for me. And I hate to, that was really always been the most important to me. And so I was behind 30 points midway through the season. So it was pretty hopeless. And so to hit there was people online, this is the year Levi's, he's done and there's no way he can come back. And so I was even telling Samantha, I was like, I don't think I can do it. It just seems impossible. I was like, a miracle would have to happen. And so I literally won every tournament after that and ended up winning by 30 points. And it was literally the weirdest feeling at the end of the year, sitting there holding that Shooter of the Year trophy, because I'd already given up on that, for this year. I was like, this is the year I'm going to lose it, so to have won it again, it feels pretty cool. And so dodged a bullet for sure.
Man, that's incredible. That was like goosebump worthy. That's a cool story, man. I can't believe it. That's
especially because our target archery is such a mental game, and to have already counted yourself out, but still perform at a level where you can come back and win it. I don't know how you do that.
Well, I think it's a testament to his abilities. That's even though you're 31, that you're a veteran in your sport, right? You're average age there. You kind of middle of the pack, or is it a young man's game?
Yeah, I'm middle of the pack now. I remember always being the rookie. They always called me the rookie, and the kid, and so now I don't get called anymore, which I really wish I did. Now, no, I'm middle. There's guys from 50 to 17 out there, and a lot of young guys coming up. And I guarantee you one thing: I'm never going to look an 18-year-old kid in the face and tell him I can beat my record.
I was going to say, I bet there was a real good life lesson there for you of how to be treated, how to treat others. I mean, because that's one thing you never want to slam the door in someone's face.
Right.
Just not the kind of person you want to be.
Right. No, and if somebody does, I'm going to be the first one standing there to congratulate them, because I know what kind of dedication it's going to take to do that, and so, but there's some kids, man, that are just incredibly talented, and people have no idea the type of dedication these guys really put into the tournament side of things, and they look at it as maybe a hobby, but for the top guys, it's their life. I mean, they spend an entire day, every day of the week, just honing their craft, and they're unbelievable. A lot of guys that nobody knows their name, but I do, and I'm watching them, and they're incredibly talented.
Seems a lot like the rodeo. Guys invest a lot of time and effort and money into it, and they may come out with nothing, or they may come out on top. You just
at least here you hitting some 2,000-pound bulls not trying to kill you.
That is the only difference, which is a splitting of a hair.
That is a slight difference. Yeah.
If you break a bone shooting a bow and arrow, you're doing something wrong.
I've seen people do it, but yeah, I don't know how.
You're probably not going to get gored at a 3D event or something. Yeah. No. So, Levi, just out of curiosity, do you have any kind of weird pre-game tradition or ritual that you have to do before you start shooting?
No, I try to always, keep that kind of stuff out of it. I pray a lot, man. I've won a lot of tournaments that I literally didn't think I was even remotely in the game for, and I know that I'm not the one to take credit for that. And so I always try to give God all the credit, because I literally know he has won a lot of these tournaments for me. So that's really what I try to do beforehand. And it really calms me down, is I just put it in his hands and say, hey, I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to put a really good plan together and try to execute it, and know that, after that, it's in your hands. It's not in my control, the outcome. Totally. So that really has helped me for my whole career to kind of just calm my nerves and execute my plan and be okay with the outcome no matter what happens.
So you kind of alluded to it there. How much strategy is involved in target archery? I mean, for your average guy that may not know much about it, how much strategy is involved there?
A ton in what I do, which is 3D. Now I do it all, but what I love is 3D. What I've been most successful at is what ASA, IBO. So it's unknown distance. We don't get to use rangefinders. And it's, a course. So there's 20 targets a day for 2 days, and then they take the top 5 and we go into a final shoot down. So you really have to strategize and know, what targets to be aggressive on, and what targets to just lay up on, and kind of get a feel for what the field is doing, and to know when you really need to mash the gas, or if you should put it on cruise control. And I think that's where I've probably won more tournaments than not, is managing the course. And that's kind of what we call it, is just go out and manage a course. And you can shoot, like I've had tournaments I shot better than everybody and didn't even make the finals because I had a terrible game plan and was aggressive on targets that I never should have been. And so it's a ton of strategy. Now, Vegas and indoor nationals and all those tournaments, there's no strategy. I mean, you're standing at 20 yards, and the game is you can't miss. And so those types of games, there's not really a lot of strategy, and you really need to be able to go into autopilot and just shut your mind completely off. Because like in Vegas, it's a marathon, man. It's 3 days of shooting. And if you miss one arrow, even if it's your first one, and you're shooting at a spot the size of a quarter, if you miss it once, you're done. You can go home. I mean, it's over. So because there's going to be 20 guys that don't miss.
I'd be screwed.
Yeah, it'd be a quick trip for me.
So I mean, it's those kind of games I hate, because it's like, oh, I got to just sit here and endure this brutal mentality for 3 days, But I like thinking. I like being able to put a plan together and executing, step by step.
Well, that fear of missing leads us really well into our question of the day.
Yeah. The question of the day is brought to you by the Lacrosse Alpha Burley Pro. Tread lightly, hunt confidently.
Hi, my name's Bill from Springville, New York. And our season started 3 days ago. I haven't even been to the woods to check on the stands or even to see what the deer sign is, all because of the dreaded target panic. It took the fun and excitement right out of it. I've tried everything except for a back tension release, and that's only because of the cost of it. If you could give me any insight or help to get rid of this target panic, I would much appreciate it, so I can get back in the woods and have some fun. Thank you.
Man, I feel for him, because, I think every archer's probably gone through this at some point.
Everyone right now feels, and by the way, his name is Joe. Joe's a DeerCast user. He submitted the question via DeerCast. I know the audio got a little garbled there at the beginning. We all feel bad for Joe because we've all been Joe.
So Levi, how can we help Joe?
Please.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, I've been there twice, and once when I was younger, and it was so bad that I couldn't even look through my peep. I would dump the release as I was getting into my peep, and I remember being a kid just crying, and my dad looking at me like I was an idiot.
That didn't help.
And
dads are great.
Yeah, everybody's been there. It is a terrible thing, man. It does take the fun out of shooting and hunting. You have no confidence in yourself and your shooting, and so there's a lot of different things, and this is probably the number one question I've been asked for the last 10 years is how do I beat target panic? And there's a lot of answers, because there's a lot of causes of target panic. But I think the main one is fear of missing or fear of failure. And so, like you were just talking about, but the best thing I have ever found for target panic doesn't even involve shooting an arrow, which is weird. But what I have seen more people cure target panic by doing this drill, and it's an aiming drill, because in archery, you have to be able to separate aiming from the release. And you should never be thinking about firing that release, because your conscious mind can only think about one thing at a time. You can't consciously think about aiming while you're consciously thinking about squeezing your release. So squeezing that release should happen subconsciously while you consciously are focusing on keeping that pin where you want it. So the one drill I've seen that works and has helped more people cure target panic is for a week. Obviously, ideally, this would be in the off season and we do longer than a week. But since hunting season is here, what I would say for Joe to do, or anybody that's struggling with target panic, is go out in your yard, go to 30 yards, 20 yards, wherever. If you got a block target or a Glendale, or any kind of target, and just pull your bow back and aim on that target. And if you're shooting a caliper release, don't even put your finger on the trigger. Don't do anything. Just aim and put your pin on that spot. And when your pin starts to break down and you start to shake, just let down and don't fire a shot, and do that over and over. And what you're doing is telling your mind, hey, I don't even have to shoot this shot. I don't have to release it just because my pin hit the dot. I don't have to shoot this shot just because it's sitting there on the middle. So it really separates the two. And so you can really focus on aiming, what you should be doing. And then the next drill you're going to want to do, it's 2 drills. You want to do what we call blank belling. Walk up to the target, 3 feet, 4 feet away where you're not going to miss. Pull back and aim at the target, then close your eyes and just feel what it's like to really smoothly fire that shot, just over and over, timing, just smooth over and over. And so when you separate those two drills and then bring them together after doing that for a couple weeks, it's amazing how much more calm you're able to aim, because you know that if something's not right, you do not have to fire that shot. You know, a lot of people, I think, start getting in this really, they anticipate that shot. And as soon as their pin touches that dot, they want to fire it, and they start dumping it faster and faster to the point where, it gets out of control, and they can't aim, they can't do anything right. And it can take all the fun out of it for sure.
So Levi, have you ever been at full draw in maybe a 3D tournament and decided this doesn't feel right, I need to start the sequence over and come back down?
All the time, man. I mean, all the time. And some guys do it a lot more than I do. I probably do it some of the least, but a lot of guys will do it almost every target, every situation. Because they want to kind of reset, I mean, it's not this perfected craft where every time you draw your bow back, you have, the perfect grip and the perfect aim and the wind's not blowing. And I mean, so these, a lot of these guys are letting down they have to actually put a limit on it in tournaments. We're only allowed to let down 2 times in some organizations, and then you have to fire on your third draw, because guys would just sit there and over until everything was perfect. And so they know that's how important it is to reset if things aren't right. If your mind wanders off to something, then your pin's going to wander off. And so it's because of that, only being able to consciously do one thing at a time. So the most important thing is to never think about anything but aiming. If you do that, then target panic is gone. But the instant you let something slip into your mind that says fire the shot now, that's when target panic comes in. If you're never thinking about anything but aiming, target panic doesn't exist.
It's funny you say that, because when I tend to find issues with the way I'm shooting, it's because of my concentration. It's almost always because of my concentration. Like, say, I live in the suburbs, so if I'm, I got to be very conscious of my surroundings when I'm shooting in my backyard and that kind of stuff.
Like
and so,
cat.
Whatever the case may be, if I'm on the side of the house, but if the kids are out front playing or whatever, you just got to be. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of running around. There's, you got to be aware. And so I find myself having issues where my concentration is being pulled into a different direction and not where I should be, which is what you're saying, Levi, is just aiming. Yeah. And so I find myself trying to shoot later and later in the evening before it gets dark, when most people are eating dinner or not outside or whatever the case may be, because it's about the only time I could find when it's the most quiet and I can just aim, just concentrate. And it's definitely made a difference.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I mean, we're lucky nowadays because there are some release aids too that have been developed just for target panic. And TrueFire came out with one not too long ago called the Panic X. And so this release, you can't punch it. You cannot fire it on command. So it's got a little switch you flip to on, and it will not fire unless you squeeze it slow. And so that would be an incredible training tool for somebody like Joe that is struggling with it, because he won't be able to fire the shot unless it's a slow, controlled release, So something like that. And yeah, he mentioned a back tension or a hinge style release, which is what I hunt with. But I think those are great training tools because you don't know when they're going to fire. They're all on a half moon, and so there's no hard wall. And so I like to look at releases and what we kind of talk about them as, so you're at the top of the building and you got to get to the bottom, and that's your shot. A back tension is kind of like a slide to the bottom because it's just a gradual, always moving motion that gets you there. And like a index trigger or even a thumb button, it's a hard wall. You either got to jump or you got to stay, So it's a lot easier for some people to have that little bit of movement that calms their mind down, while they're getting from the top to the bottom. And that's kind of an analogy we've used and why some people struggle with target panic. And another thing you can do with target panic, because a lot of people do it because their pin's moving around, and they're moving a lot more than normal. And when their pin hits the spot, they want to fire it. So another thing we can do is go out in the yard and draw a giant dot. I mean, like go to 20 yards and draw a dot. It's like however big you need it to where your pin will never leave it. And so what that does, and you can kind of break down and see what's causing your target panic that way, because a lot of times it can be your peak too small, your pins are too small, you're having trouble seeing, you're holding your breath, your poundage is too much, your draw length is wrong. I mean, there's so many things that can cause you to want to, end that shot early because you're uncomfortable. But most of the time it's in people's sight picture. So they're aiming, something they're seeing, they're aiming, they're shaky and that and so forth. So those couple of drills are seem to really help people a lot and calm their mind down. But it's a terrible thing, man, and it's hard to beat. But once you beat it and know you can beat it, then if it ever jumps on you again, it's a lot easier the second time.
I know, like when I get into a bad spot, and it's not often, but maybe once every couple of years, if I really get into a bad, like I got a bad habit somewhere and my list of things I got to do and shooting, I'll go to the local archery shop where I know Mike, he's a great shooter. He knows what he's doing. And it's like, all right, Mike, take a look at my shot. Yeah. What am I doing here? And whether it's your grip or grip's too tight or whatever the case may be, it is interesting to have someone else take a look at what you're doing. And Pete Shepley always says it. He's like, get a coach, it'll work, and it seems like a pretty simple statement, and it's not maybe applicable for everybody, but, film your, maybe it's as simple as setting your camera up, your phone up, filming your shot, what you're doing.
Especially using slow-mo, you can see a lot that happens.
Yeah, and checking it out yourself or going to an archerytalk.com or something like that where guys, are a forum of some sort where you could get some opinions. Although if you go to Archery Talk, you might get more opinions than you're looking for.
What?
But
are you serious? Confused between opinion and fact.
yeah, but it's helpful. It's a forum where I think, generally speaking, if you go there and in need of help, it's somewhere that guys are going to try to get you in the right spot.
And it's kind of helpful to hear that pretty much everyone struggles with target panic at some point. I think we all feel like we're isolated, we're no good, we're ineffective when that happens. And that, like, my wife knew when I was struggling because I'd come back in the house from shooting and I'd just be in a terrible mood. Yeah. Because, like, it doesn't matter how hard I work, how close I get to a deer, I'm not going to be able to hit it.
I find it funny that Levi knew of 2 times in his whole life. And he can remember, but it's like I have it like maybe twice every couple weeks.
I made a mistake back in 1986.
Dude, I mean, and look, it happens in our world all the time. I mean, guys are, that top shooters in the world, and you're, we call it the TP, and that's the dreaded.
You don't dare utter the words.
You got the TPs.
Like, old so and so's got a little case of the TP, and we're like saying it like hush over in the corner because nobody wants to say it out loud. And I mean, it'll ruin a guy's season, until he figures it out. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And if you've never experienced it, gosh, you're lucky because it's miserable, but you can beat it. And that's the good news.
Levi's playing a game of Operation while we have this conversation. He's that skilled.
Yeah. So while we have Levi here, do we have more questions? Like, I want to get as much info out of him as we can. I want to steal his time as much as we can.
So a related issue is one of our DeerCast users, Ainsley Soreko. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize, Ainsley, if I'm not. Is having a problem when I'm assuming Ainsley is she. When she shoots at deer, she's either shooting above or below, and she's not hitting her deer. So I thought that might be associated with target panic, but I know it's kind of hard to diagnose without a whole lot of more background. But Levi, what do you think might be going on with Ainsley?
Man, that's a really tough one to say. I mean, if she's missing the whole deer, gosh, that could be, I would say it could be timing. I mean, if she's making assuming she's making perfect shots and she's just having trouble hitting high and low, It could be timing issues where the bow is not timed properly, and if you pull harder into the wall, or you shoot a little more static shot from shot to shot, you can have some major inconsistencies, high and low. But if she's shooting targets well and doing it on deer, it's hard to say only on live deer. Then it could be just a case of buck fever, or seeing things differently in that moment of truth than what's actually happening. When you're aiming, which I've seen happen a lot. Not centering in your peep. When you get under that pressure, you start to drift out of your peep trying to see where that arrow hits. There's a ton of things that could be causing that. It's just, but if she's making the perfect shot, and it's frustrating because she knows she's making great shots and missing high and low, then first thing I would check would be timing on the bow. Make sure the cams are in sync, timed together, because that can cause some major high and low inconsistencies.
Absolutely.
We have another question here from Ethan Sleeman. He says, do you have any specific things that you focus on during your practice sessions? So yardage or situation?
Yeah, I try to break my practice down when I do get to practice into working on one specific thing, because I feel like if I go out and just shoot for 2 hours and shoot a course or 20 targets and don't really work on anything, then I go back in the house and not any better than I was. So I try to go out and work on things that I struggle with. I try to recognize my weaknesses when it comes to shooting and things that I could be better at, and I go out and work on them, whether that's finishing the shot as far as not dropping out early, or like I said, centering in the peep. These are all things that we all struggle with still. No matter how long you've been shooting a bow, the basics are always the basics, and if you it's very easy to get away from them because there's so many little things that make up shooting a bow. People think, oh, you just drop back and let it go, but there's so many tiny things you have to do right every time to be consistent. And so there's always something that I feel like I'm struggling with. Could be grip pressure, could be, anything. But the release, the timing, which has always been a struggle of mine. I feel like I have a 5 or 6 second window where my pin doesn't move and my shot needs to fire in there. And I always feel like I struggle working on timing and getting it to fire within that window. So yeah, I try to break it down into really specific things to work on and goals, and even set little goals in practice. And I really feel like that's made me a lot better doing that.
Sure. Gage asked my favorite question in the whole thread of DeerCast questions that were offered. Gage wants to know, should I go bow hunting?
That's easy.
Easy.
Yes, you should, Gage.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Levi, when you're aiming, how do you really zero in on that target? So I've heard a lot of people say, hey, you practice shooting smaller targets, and you kind of hone in that way. But for a guy that's just a little bit shaky or moving just a little bit, and that little bit really amplifies when you're shooting a bow. Like, what do you do to try to really, is it control your breathing, or how do you do it here?
Yeah, it's different with everybody. Like you said, some guys just don't aim as steady as others, and girls, and everybody's different. But the one thing I've noticed, that if you're focused on aiming, like I said before, and your pin is always going back to the middle, no matter if it's a dot or a spot. And that old saying, aim small, miss small, I know it's old and been overdone and everything, but it is so applicable and true, man. And I remember being little and I would struggle with shooting groups, and my dad would always say, son, I don't want you to try to hit that 12 ring. I want you to try to hit the middle of it, So, yeah, gosh, my phone. It really does sound like operation.
Yeah, you just got the wishbone.
But he was always like, I don't want you to try to hit that spot. Don't try to hit the ring. Hit the middle of it, because if you miss, you'll still hit the ring, And so that's kind of always been my goal. And I feel like even to this day, I forget that sometimes. I'll be out shooting and I'm like, why can't I score? I'm just barely missing. And So I feel like it's my focus. Your focus has to be really, really small. And even if you're shaky, if your focus is a tiny spot, it's amazing at how much better you shoot. And I'm a testament to this. If anybody goes back and watches me when I was runner up in Vegas a few years ago, I was shaking so bad, man. I was a nervous wreck because I was getting ready to win the biggest shoot in the world for $100,000+, and I was a nervous wreck, And so to be able to and shake as much as I was shaking and watching my pin and just trust that if I made a clean executed shot that it was going to hit the middle, and watching my arrows just find the middle is a crazy feeling. But I think a lot of times people start shaking like that and they just hurry and make a bad shot and dump the shot because they're like, I'm not going to hit what I'm aiming at anyway. That's where they go wrong. If your focus and that pin is always going back to the spot, it seems like no matter if you're shaking or not, that arrow is going to find its mark or pretty close to it. And I've seen that happen with a lot of people. Just make a clean shot and focus on aiming all the way through the end, and don't dump out early. Don't give up on your shot. That's the main thing.
You mentioned groups in there, and that's something I've never been good at as grouping, really. And how, is that, I guess, go hand in hand with what you just mentioned there in aiming?
Yeah, for sure it can. And we even do what's called group tuning, so it could be that your arrows just don't group good together, that they, and there are 100 different things it could be, but aiming is definitely a big part of that. And aiming small, which I think a lot of people just go out and shoot their Glendale buck and just try to hit it in the vitals, and if your goal is to hit it in the vitals, then your group's going to be the size of those vitals, but if your goal is to hit top of the heart where it meets the lungs, then your group's going to be a lot smaller, and I think that's a lot of people just, go out and shoot to be shooting instead of really micro focus and micro aim. I think a lot of people would be better off if they did that.
Just last night I was shooting and I went and got some little orange. I think they're more for, I think I might have got them from like when we were partnered up with Daisy BB guns. It was like a little bitty, there may be even not even an inch.
Sticker.
Yeah, sticker. Mm-hmm. And I stuck them on my targets because it was like most targets, where you're aiming, it's a big spot. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, man, I gotta hone in on this a little tighter. And so I just stuck those stickers. And Dad, when I was growing up, he always used to take a orange, cause he's a construction guy, so he always had orange spray paint in his truck. And he would just take and put a little dot on, back then it was just a big styrofoam block, but right. He'd always do that. And I think you don't necessarily, definitely helps if you could shoot 40, 50, 60 in practice, and it helps you at 20 and 30. But the other way to kind of get around that is to have a smaller spot that you're aiming at.
Yeah, for sure. And I've always been a huge advocate of shooting way further than you plan on hunting. If your max distance is 40, then practice at 80, because when you go back to 40, you feel like you can't miss.
Sure.
And, same difference is if you're shooting at a 4-inch circle at 20, if all you can shoot in your yard is 20 yards and you shoot at a 4-inch circle, your group's going to be about the size of that circle. But sure. Start stepping down. Start challenging yourself and practice, and that's the only way you're going to get better.
What kind of, on your setup, what kind of arrow do you use for hunting? Is it heavier? Is it smaller in diameter? Like, what's your perfect setup there?
Yeah, this year I'm super pumped with what I got going on. It's a real small diameter arrow. It's a Pierce Tour is what it's called, from Gold Tip, but it's real small and it weighs about 500 grains. And I've got it 4-fletched with a smaller profile vane, and I started doing that last year, and I found it's really quiet in flight. Instead of fletching 3 big vanes on it, or a higher profile, which is pretty loud, and it has a lot of wind drag to it, which has always been good for stabilizing broadheads. So I was like, and Randy Ulmer, used to do, I don't know if he still does that. He would put 6 tiny vanes on his arrows.
Holy.
For that exact reason, so they're quiet in flight. And so I put 4 kind of mid-sized vanes on my arrows last year, and it really did well quiet and shot great groups at long range. And so I kind of stuck with that this year to through with a real small diameter, heavy arrow, and I'm super happy with it right now. So
seems like the four vein setup is becoming more and more popular. I hear more and more people doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's great for stabilizing arrows, but it's also what a lot of people don't realize is you can use a smaller vein and do that and create a quieter flight, which is, I think a lot of times when animals react, it's not that they're reacting to the bow. It's that buzz of the arrow coming at them,
Sure.
Because if we've watched footage, deer all in a food plot, and the only one that ducks is the one that's getting shot at. Because that arrow, or the ones that the arrow goes by, or the deer over to the side over there don't react and duck. It's that they're hearing that arrow flying at them through the air, and it's getting closer and closer, and I think they're freaking out over that. Obviously a lot of times they do duck the bowstring, but if you've got a quiet arrow in flight, I think it makes a huge difference on how much that deer is going to wheel and react to you.
Sure. We could keep Levi all day.
I know. I hate it.
Incredible.
Just take up all his time.
Right. Levi, if folks want to follow you and learn more and gain some of your expertise, how would they do that?
They can go follow me on Instagram. That's where I pretty much put my whole life story. Bow Life Levi. Watch the show. It's on Sportsman's Channel Wednesday nights at 8:30, or go to our website, bowlife.com. Pretty much all those places you can keep up with us and see what we've got going on.
Great.
I got one last final question off the wall.
All right.
Have you ever hunted with a rifle before?
Yeah, dude. I grew up hunting with guns. It's part of my heritage, and I love it. But I just get so much hate email for it anymore. I'm like, man, I collect guns. I love shooting guns. And me and my dad, used to rifle hunt together all the time. And sometimes it's just fun to pick one up and go hunting. But I don't get to do it a lot anymore, unfortunately.
Maybe they'll give you a little more leeway with your son hunting with you, which I saw you guys were hunting with the crossbow. But, you want it to be fun. You want to have a good – there's so many good traditions that I don't know, that I personally think about when I think of gun season, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people that way too.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. That's a huge part of who I am and what I grew up doing. So I'll always do it to some extent, and I definitely want to kind of pass that down, because that's some of my best memories is hunting in game land, public land, South Carolina with my dad in rifle season. And if we shot does or 4 points and had them all hanging up at camp, it was just a cool memory that I have of hunting, and I don't want to lose that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we need to thank Joe for submitting the question. Hopefully, Joe, we've been able to help you with your target panic. If you want to submit a question to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast and have us answer it on air, potentially, go to druryoutdoors.com/podcast, and you will see a tab on the right-hand side of the screen. It says leave a message. Click that, leave us a voice message, and we may be answering your question on the air.
Absolutely. If you want to follow along, of course, with the podcast, you can subscribe to it anywhere that podcasts are available, iTunes, Stitcher, all those places. And, of course, you could watch the podcast at the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel.
There's a lot to look at.
You may want to just subscribe to the audio version. That's up to you. We get it. But
we get it.
If you want to see Levi in person, that's the place to go. Yes. So check us out at Drury Outdoors YouTube channel, and we got all kinds of cool stuff going on. New episodes of Winchester and Drury's Natural Barn are going up every Monday. The podcast, of course, I think goes up every Wednesday. Throwback Thursdays, all kinds of cool stuff going on. And, of course, you've been hearing us talk about it a lot lately, but DeerCast, the DeerCast app, you can go to the Google Play Store or the Apple Store and the App Store and get it for free this season. Check it out. So far, the feedback's been outstanding. We got a lot of people using it to help, just kind of another tool in their arsenal that helps them go in and get the deer of a lifetime. So check it out, please, and by all means, follow along with us on social media at Drury Outdoors.
Great. Well, we should probably shut this thing down, huh?
Yeah, let Levi get back to throwing, practicing 100 arrows a day and being a super stud.
Levi, thanks, man, for joining us.
No, thank you guys for having me. It was fun. I appreciate it.
Hey, good luck this season, buddy.
Thanks, you guys too. If I can ever help, let me know.
Appreciate
Sounds
you.
good.
All right.
All right,
Peace.
let's shut it down.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV is brought to you by Lacrosse Footwear.